Hello everybody, look at what we have here. This is the original Prusa MK4. That's the new printer from Prusa. I just received it. This is a kit. We're going to assemble it together. Just to introduce myself, I've been using Prusa printers for 5 years now. I got my first Prusa printer in 2017. Actually, I got it in 2018 because it took 6 months to arrive. They were in very high demand back then, and this I've been waiting for this one for over 3 months now. The Prusa MK3 is really a workhorse. It's been working perfectly for me. I've had very little problems. There is a tiny bit of maintenance to do, and we'll talk about this when we assemble this one. But it's very simple. It's very robust. I bought my first MK3. Received it in February 2018. I assembled it, and it took me about a year to receive the MMU. The MMU is a multi-material unit. It allows you to print in several colors. It changes filaments as it goes. I got this about a year after I got my first printer, and so what I did is I bought actually a second one, and I installed the MMU unit on the second printer because I didn't want to modify the printer head in order to accommodate the MMU unit. By the time I got the MMU unit, it was actually already the MMU 2S, and so I've never upgraded it. I still have it as a MMU 2S. So I have a MK3 and MK3 with the MMU 2S, and I upgraded the both printers to MK3S and MK3S Plus. One of the great things about Prusa is that they give you a path to upgrade. For the MK4, the upgrade kit is actually quite expensive, and so I decided to buy a whole new printer. So now I have three MK Prusa printers. So two MK3, one MK4, which is this kit. Hopefully we'll be able to make it run probably by tomorrow evening. I'm gonna do a tiny bit of it today, and I'll resume tomorrow. The reason I bought it as a kit, and I would highly recommend you do so, is that no matter how good the printers are, at some point you're going to run into some trouble. You're going to have something that comes off the print bed. It's going to make a huge mess. You're going to have to service the printer head, and when you have to do so, it's better if you know how the printer is actually assembled, because you're going to have to disassemble it and then reassemble it. So there's no reason whatsoever to buy a fully assembled printer unless you're building a printer farm. So if you need 100 of them, you're better off having the guys from Prusa doing it. But if you're only buying 1, 2, 3 like me, you shouldn't buy a fully assembled printer, although Prusa sells them. The other thing that I need to mention is that the price difference, which is about $300, is actually a bit more than that, because when you buy the kit is just below $800, which means that it's gonna come custom free. The assembled printer is gonna be above the $800 threshold, so you're gonna pay the duties plus custom fees, and every time it happens, they get you. I've had that problem before on filament. If you buy a huge batch of filament, or if you buy a printer with some filament, as some friends of mine have done, you're going to end up paying US customs, and it might be different in your country. I have no idea where you live, and I live in the US, and the US customs is very haphazard. It's completely random. There's no logic behind it. The services are bad. You won't even know when they invoice you. That you won't even know why they invoiced you, and it's gonna be different. Two people ordering the exact same thing at the exact same time are going to pay two different set of custom fees. It happens every single time. So buy a kit. It's gonna be a tiny bit cheaper. You can avoid custom fees, and you're going to be able to deassemble it. You're going to know how it's assembled because you're going to assemble it yourself. It's not complicated, as we're going to see. So without further ado, let's open this guy. Alright. So the Prusa printers used to come in those black plastic boxes, and thank God, actually nowadays apparently it's in a cardboard box. It was hard to open back then. I've never really understood why it was packed that way. It was bizarre. Alright. So what do we have here? Okay, so we have a letter from Joseph Prusa, the owner of Prusa Research. Thank you for purchasing the original Prusa MK4. Your support allows us to invest in further development of open source 3D printers. I haven't mentioned the fact that Prusa printers are open source, but I will soon talk about this. This is an important point. And other 3D printing innovations, including the Prusa Slicer software, our high-end Prusa materials, and the Printables.com community platform. And that's important. All of those points are important. The first point that he makes is that the Prusa Research 3D printers are open source. This means that you can find the parts pretty much everywhere in the world. They're all on Amazon US if you need to replace something. Prusa has a very good support for its customers. They send spare parts almost immediately. I only had to use that twice on filament sensors that have been replaced since. You get them FedEx 3 days anywhere in the world. They're very prompt, they're very fast. So that's the first point. The second point that he makes is he talks about the Prusa Slicer. So every Prusa machine comes with software. That software is open sourced. You can actually go and change it, and you can edit it, you can improve it, you can do pretty much whatever you could possibly dream of doing. Some of its Chinese competitors have actually taken advantage of it. I can think of at least one brand of Chinese printers that use the Prusa software, open source software, without disclosing their modifications. It's been an ongoing battle with some Chinese manufacturer who think that open source means free to do whatever you want with it, which is not quite the case. And the other point that he makes is he talks about the Prusa materials. So if you buy a Prusa, you have to be aware that Prusa produces what they call Prusament. You get Prusa filament if you want with your Prusa. It's the best filament probably in the world. Prusa has exacting standards for their machines. They're probably the best filaments you can get out there. They're expensive, and you do not have to use Prusament, but this one came with the printer. It actually came separately. It came a couple days earlier because it was cleared through the customs a couple of days before I received the printer. So you're gonna get this with your printer. We'll play with it later. It's an excellent filament. Some other brands actually do produce their material. It's not unique to Prusa, but they do, and theirs is probably near the very top of the line. And last but not least, he talks about the Printables.com community. I'm gonna put all those links down below. When you buy a Prusa, you can go and get help from Prusa directly, 24/7. I once actually, when I bought this one, I actually called them. I had a few questions about the specs. It can be 1 a.m. in Czech Republic. They have somebody to answer questions. They were very nice. They helped me out. It was between like 1 and 2 a.m. in the morning in Czech Republic. 24/7. You have a Prime. You can ping them. You'll find a human being to help you out. They also have forums. The forums are absolutely excellent. I would highly recommend you go on the forums before you start complaining about problem XYZ, because the problem that you're gonna have has been solved a long time ago, most likely, unless you're a super advanced user and you may have a new question. But most of the questions are gonna be answered on Prusa Forums. And he also talks about, he doesn't talk about Prusa Forums in his letter, but he talks about the Printables.com. Printables.com is Prusa's proprietary website, which is a repository for 3D files. So if you're looking for a dinosaur clip, some wood tools for your garage, or some cookie cutters for your kitchen, they're on Prusa, they're on Printables.com. I'm gonna put the link down below. Again, Printables.com. Printables.com is the fastest growing 3D printer community in the world. You do not need to have a Prusa to use Printables.com, but obviously most of the files there have already been sliced for Prusa printers. So again, if you own a Prusa, you need to be on Prusa on Printables.com. The warranty is absolutely excellent. Again, I only had to use it twice, but it went like immediately. The guy knew exactly what the problem was, sent us the new part, replacement part, upgraded part actually. So that's highly appreciable. And the last point that he makes is the Prusa Slicer. So he talks about the Prusa Slicer software. The Prusa Slicer software is a software that transforms 3D files out of CAD programs like Fusion 360, Tinkercad, SolidWorks into files that are readable by the printer. You need to do that translation, and the translation is done by a piece of software. That piece of software is called Prusa Slicer. It's one of the best two programs. There are two leading programs out there to do this job, and Prusa Slicer is one of them, and you get it for free with your printer. Prusa Slicer works with other brands. I actually used Prusa Slicer with Reality Machines. It's probably the best software out there. The other one is Cura. So I would highly recommend you look at Cura, and then you probably do like me, you probably go back to Prusa Slicer if you have a Prusa. I even use my my Prusa Slicer on my Anycubic SLA printer. I'll get into SLA versus FDM. Okay. Anyway, so let's put this away. That's the Prusa cheat sheet. We're gonna need this. And we have instructions, and the instructions, I'm gonna have to go get apparently I'm gonna have to go get a tablet, because the Prusa instructions are apparently on the web. It used to be a book. I'm actually glad. Oh, actually, never mind. There's an handbook. Okay, good. Oh, and there's a packing slip. That's the test that they did. So even though you get a kit, every piece has been individually tested. So the electronics board, the power supply, the motors, everything has been tested at the factory. So there shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so you get a printing handbook. I have like 3 of them. Alright. Get a power cable, and it's really tightly packed in there. Alright, so join our community. So that's very important. Go on Prusa and go join the community. Alright. And that's the USB flash drive to put your files. We won't be using that. That's the power supply. Alright. Some packing. That's the motor kit. We are getting new motors. So the biggest improvement between the MK3 and the MK4 are the motors. So you need new motors. In fact, MK4 with the MK3 motors would not be an MK4. that's the extrusion and plates, and that's the frame and the heat bed. So okay, so that's pretty much it. So you probably cannot see me anymore, which might be a good thing. Alright, so we're gonna redistribute this, and I'm gonna go get a tablet because, and I'll be right back, because without a tablet apparently I cannot do this installation. So okay, so we need a tablet. And most important, you get a pack of Haribo. So you every time you complete a step in the installation manual, you get to eat a Haribo, and it's very good. So we're gonna eat a lot of Haribos. Not me because I don't eat sugar, but I have it. Alright, I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back with the laptop. So the first thing you need to do is you need to go on prusa3d.com/mk4, and that's where you're gonna find the assembly manual apparently. It's no longer included in the kit. It used to be a big, thick printed book. I'm kind of almost glad it doesn't exist anymore. Alright, so we need tools. So all the tools are provided. It's actually, so these are the tools from the last install. So when I built my first MK3 and my second MK3s. Everything you need should be there. And that's pretty much it. The bags are labeled, they explain that. You have a spare bag with a few spare parts in case you lose some. Alright, as you can see, I speed up this part. I was looking for the screws for the fasteners. So that's the first thing you need to get. You need to get the fasteners. And I was also looking for the tools, even though I already have them. But so fasteners, tools, and you want to grab the frame, and that's likely the most important. It's not the most complicated, but it's definitely the most important part of building a Prusa printer, or building any printer for that matter. And the reason is you need to have, the frame needs to be absolutely square. If your printer is not square, it's not gonna be able to print. Actually, it's worse than that. Towards the end of the build, we're going to actually do tests. We're going to test if the printer is actually square. And if it's not square, you have to go back to this point, and that's the first point. So you may be 7 hours into or 8 hours into a build likely, and you're finding yourself having to undo everything in order to refasten some of the screws here. This is bad. You do not want to have to do that. So you have to take extra precaution, be very, very mindful of what you're doing in the first step. The first step, again, that's how square your printer is going to be. The printer software can deal with the fact that your frame is not at 90-degree angle with the base, with the XY plane. But if your Z plane is not at 90-degree angle with your XY plane, if it's by a tiny amount, the software is going to compensate for that tiny amount. But the best thing would be to have actually a perfectly square frame on a perfectly square XY plane. So the X, Y, and Z axis need to be absolutely square. I would say, if you find during the test that your frame is not square, just go back to the initial point. But since you've actually watched that video, you're going to be doing it very slowly, very mindfully, and you're not going to have a crooked print bed or a crooked frame. We should not have that by the time we finish. Or actually, I'm not taking this apart. I'm only doing it once. I've assembled 5 Prusa printers so far, because I did it for friends and family as well as mine. Never had a crooked one. So you take your time, you do that very first chapter very carefully. And the rest of it, I mean, you can speed up a tiny bit, but not that part. Alright, so let's go back to commentary. So I installed I read the instructions, I installed the 8 screws. I barely turn the screws. They are barely touching the frame. So the screw heads are barely touching the frame. So it's not moving, but it's not tightened. Again, this is your most important task of all the. So you're going to wiggle it a tiny bit so it finds its perfect best seating. And once you're done, you're actually going to tighten the screws and you're going to tighten them diagonally. So you're going to tighten this one and then that one and then that one and then that one, and you're going to repeat this, and you're going to put a tiny bit more torque every time. The screws are made of stainless steel. The frame and the extrusions are made of aluminum. They are very strong extrusion, but are still aluminum. It's filleted as an aluminum thread. So if you go too tight, you're going to damage the thread. If you go too strongly, you're going to damage that thread. If you're screwing too lightly, it's not going to be square. So you have to find that equilibrium. Okay, so, and you should not hesitate too much though, because, all right, so we're going to do it a tiny bit. There you go. Another tiny bit. There you go. Okay. So now this one's not moving anymore. So there you go again. And then diagonally, there you go. And I do not apply too much force yet. I'm going to do this one. And then that one. I thought of using blue Loctite, but I've never done it on any of my printers. I would actually recommend maybe that you use blue Loctite if you're not sure. They have never come apart. And all the ones I've actually assembled, none of them have come apart. Alright, so diagonal, 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 diagonal. Okay, so that's the last pass. I'm gonna do it as strong as I can. Alright. I'm applying quite a lot of force. I probably stripped it. Yeah, it's coming off the square head. The X head. X. So alright. It's not going anywhere. Should I have used blue Loctite? Yes, maybe. It doesn't say in the documentation, so I'm not gonna do that, but maybe the next one I do. I have another one to do in about 2 weeks. And I'm gonna repeat, and I'm gonna tighten. I'm wiggling to make sure it's bedded correctly. Alright, so we're going to install this in the front and the back. So this is the front one, that's the short one. The back one is this one. It's gonna go in the back. So now we've reached the point where we are installing the rubber pads, the feet of the printer. So we're going to actually flip it. Alright, and we're going to install 4 of these at the bottom. And now we need to install the cable clips. So I've never seen one of those. That's the first time. They weren't on the previous printers. So at this point, normally we would attach the power supply, the PSU, the power supply unit, which is this big thing in this box. It would actually go there. I'm not going to install it, and long story short, I'm actually going to put this printer into an enclosure. I'll talk about this at the end a bit more. And the power supply would hover it inside of an enclosure. The idea of an enclosure is to keep the warm, hot air around the printer so that the models that you're printing have a better bed adhesion. It's not very important for polylactic acid or PETG, which is the plastic they make the water bottle with, but it's important for ABS, for example, or for ASA. For high temperature plastics, you want the printer inside of an enclosure. And even for polylactic acid, which is the most common type of filament, you get better result if your printer is inside of an enclosure. So I'm actually going to keep the power supply on the side, and I actually run the wires from the power supply to the printer, and I leave the power supply outside of the enclosure. So that way the power supply will be cold while the rest of the printer is hot. So I'm basically skipping the entire installation of the power supply for now. Alright, which brings me to step 18, because step 17 was attaching the PSU. So now I have to install this thing. So I need this box. There you go. So I installed the 6 screws. There's 2 here on the rail using the inserts, and then there's 4 on the sides. And you're actually sliding it in place, and hopefully it holds tight. So the next step was to attach thermal pads. They go interestingly, they go actually below the memory, as far as I can tell, and some of the components, and I think that might be the motor drivers. I'm not certain. So they go underneath, and they are marked. They are rectangles. It seems to be fairly simple. So this board is actually 32 bits. That's the first time that Prusa has a 32-bit board on their MK series. It's gonna be great. It's gonna go faster, bigger, and it's gonna be Wi-Fi, which the previous ones weren't. Okay, I want to do it in front of the camera like so, because it's a bit of a struggle. You have to put those 5 screws. There's not that much space, and it doesn't really want to go in there. There you go. So that's the electronics once it's installed. That's a good job. That's the first step. Of course, I put the screw in one of the wrong holes, despite the fact that the manual exactly says, put aside your instincts and leave the hole on the bottom right empty. Well, I followed my instincts and that was the wrong one. And I think that's used for the grounding, so we'll probably use it later. Not surprising. Okay. Fully tighten the 5 screws, but very carefully. I did not tighten them. I barely touched them. And so what's going to happen is we're going to have a white belt. It's going to go, if it's the same thing as the MK3, it's going to go from here through this groove here and come back. And that's what's going to move the print bed in that direction. So we're going to have a pulley on one side and we're going to have a motor on the other side. So we have to install this part. So Prusa printers are 3D printed using Prusa printers. So in fact, a lot of the parts that we get today are, but that's the first one we installed, that's 3D printed. But all the other parts almost are going to be 3D printed. And that's a good opportunity to learn the genius of how to make mechanical parts with 3D printers. I've learned a lot by actually assembling the printers and upgrading them. So I'm putting the printer aside. We're going to assemble our first motor. So this is a stepper motor. We have now installed the X motor, and we're reaching the point where we have to use the X-axis motor. We have to be careful, they are the same in terms of specs, but one has a cord that's longer than the other. So the wiring is important. If you don't want to find yourself removing the X-axis motor and replacing it with the Y-axis motor because you've actually swapped them, pay attention, it's written on the motor. So this one is the X-axis. We're going to actually construct the entire X-axis. Is going to look something like that. It's gonna allow the printer head to move along the X-axis, and we've already taken care of the Y-axis. So this is what I'm going to do right now, and I'm going to speed up the video again. Okay, we have completed the assembly of the two rods into the motor support, as well as the idler on the other side. The idler is this one part. What's important is that through those tiny holes here, we should see the screws. We should see these screws. They are used to prevent the rod from going any further, but they should be in contact with those rods. And I don't know if you noticed, but I went out and I came back and I put some black screws instead of the silver screws on the other side, because I figured that it would be easier to see them. I have like buckets of screws. Um, I think they're easier to see. It's not obvious on the video, but you can actually see the black screw and you can see the stainless steel rod. It's much better, I think. All right. All right. So the ball bearings are actually sliding really easily on the rods. They should be sliding really well. Okay, at this point we're actually going to add the X-carriage. The So this is what is actually holding the extruder head. So the extruder head is gonna be going like this on these rods, and they're gonna be held by this piece. So we need to do it, and we need to do it properly. So we're on step 25. Alright, and now we need to install the belts. I'm going to keep that part for tomorrow. The belts have a tiny bit of a trick. You need to have the right tension. I shouldn't use the word trick. The belts need to be tightened properly, and we'll do that tomorrow. Okay, so we've reached the point where we need to install the belts. Those belts are very sturdy, and if you install them properly, they last forever. About a year ago, I bought a replacement set, and when I started taking apart my printer, I wanted to clean it, I wanted to do some upgrades, and I realized that the old belts were actually still exactly as good as on day one, and so I never changed the belt. They're very, very strong, and the only thing that you need to be careful about is that if you don't have the correct tension, um, if you have enough force, you're gonna skip a bit, and it's actually going to create a layer shift. You're going to print a layer that's gonna have shifted by one from the. It's going to shift by uh, one tooth of the belt, and so in fact you're going to start printing, let's say, a tower, and then the top of the tower is gonna be shifted by one tooth or two tooth if you move the lot. So you need to. It's imperative that you have the correct tension on those belts, and we're going to install them. We're going to tension them properly, and I understand that Prusa has a new application to tension them. All right, so we've installed the belt, and it was much easier than I thought, and I can already tell you I have the right tension, and you can figure it out by listening at the sound, and also you can actually check the tension like this. It shouldn't be sagging, and I think I have already a pretty good tension. So I think I'm done with the X-carriage. It's pretty good. So we're making some progress, and we're supposed to take one more of the Haribo candies, but I'll leave that guys. I leave those guys to you. Alright, so the next step is the Z-axis assembly apparently. So the Z-axis assembly, we're going to install two motors on the side here. There's going to be one here and one here, two big rods. They're going to be held in place at the top of the frame, and the X-carriage is going to move. The X-carriage is going to move up and down on that z-axis. So it's going to be like that. So we need two new motors, two rods, and the clips. So those clips at the top, those right there. So they're gonna come. I can't remember exactly, but they're coming something like yeso. They may be a bit different on your new model as they were from what they were on the MK3. All right, and then at the bottom we're going to add those parts. And that's the last orange part, so we're going to install that. At this point, before going any further, I should say two things. The first one is I fumbled with the rubber pads. I couldn't find them. I cut the video. I started looking for them everywhere, and they're in a bag called Z bag, the axis bag with all the wires. So they're not with the motors. And the second thing that's very important is there's a short wire. The short wire goes against the short wire motor goes on the side of the electronics box because it doesn't, for the connection it's immediate, it's just right there. And of course the long wire has to go below the printer on its entire length. And so if you think about it, in order to connect back to the electronics box, you need to put the long wire motor on the side that's further from the electronics box. That's really simple. And the last point, the wires do not go. The wires do not go in the front; they go in the back. And I messed that up on my first Prusa printer 5 years ago. Okay, so I struggle a tiny bit with the screws on this side, and for some reason they went just fine on this side. They're actually a bit loose on this side, and then they're really tight on this one. The parts are absolutely gorgeous. They're very dense and they're extremely well engineered. And so I already said that earlier, but I would urge you to actually pay attention to the way the parts are actually manufactured. They are made with your printer. They are made with the MK4. Prusa's one of the world's largest print farms. Prusa even won the world record for the largest number of printers used in a single room a few years back, over 1,000. They still have more than 500 printers in their print farm. That's how they produce those parts. Those parts are actually dense. This is very dense. This is a beautiful, beautiful part. This is great engineering. We need to look at those because they're absolutely fantastic. Beautiful, beautiful job on the part of the engineers at Prusa. All right, we are done. So this is what we did, and we placed two zip ties on this side, and on that side we placed one zip tie right there on this one, and the two screws on each side into the box, and that's what my box looks like now in close up. This is a very impressive pack of wires. So as you can see, it was easy, except maybe putting all the wires into that sleeve. Those sleeves are not very cooperative. Once they're in there, they never move. Again, I have about 5,000 hours on each one of my Prusa printers, and neither of them have ever lost a wire. Not one of them ever came out of the sleeve. So we're on to the extruder head. This concludes step 34 of the fourth part, and we've actually built the x-axis completely. We built the z-axis completely. We haven't connected the wires yet, but I expect it's coming. The next step is to build the extruder. And I think that at this point I have so much footage that I'm going to actually cut this video in two, otherwise it's going to be hours and hours, even with speeding up, and that's not fun for you guys, it's not good for me either. So I'll have part two. The part two will be building the extruder, building the Y, building the bed. So extruder, bed, and then wiring, and then the first print. We'll do that together all the way up to the first print. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.